Hello everyone. In this video we will take a look at how we can get started with Angular CLI. So first we can open the terminal, and I am using Visual Studio Code by the way, and we can open the terminal here, and first we need to install the Angular CLI globally. So we can run this command npm install -g at angular/CLI. So now this will go ahead and install the Angular CLI globally on our local machine. Now after it is finished, we can check our Angular CLI version by typing ng-v. So here you can see the Angular CLI version, and let's clear the terminal now. Now to create a new Angular project, what we can do is we can type ng new and then the name of the project. So I will say ng CLI, right? And now we have couple of options. Actually we can pass many flags. So if we run this command, it will actually generate the project for us. But what do we want is we want to pass additional parameters. So if we pass -- routing, so it will add the routing to our Angular CLI project. We can also add a flag for the style. So if we do style equal to SCSS, now instead of CSS, it will generate our project with SCSS files. And we can also pass -- dry run. So now what it will do is it will create the project, but it won't create it on our file system. It will just show us the files it will generate, and if we are agree with it, and then we can run the command again with the dry run. So I can also pass -- skip install. So what this will do is when we create a new Angular project, it will install the dependencies along with it. But if we don't want to install the dependencies right away and we just want to create the project structure, then we can make use of this parameter. So let's run it, and if you see we are running it with dry run, so it won't generate anything on our file system. So let's run it, and right away you can see the files it will generate on our file system, right? And now what we can do is we can run this command without a dry run. So I can remove this, and now I have run this command. So if I change the directory to our newly created project, so that is ng-CLI, and then I want to open it inside VS Code, and I also want to open it in this instance of VS Code, so I can add -r with it. So now it will open this project in our VS Code instance, right? So here you can see the file structure that we get with it. So currently if you see, we don't have that node modules folder. So this is because we haven't run the ng-new command without -- skip install. So if we had removed -- skip install, so that will actually install the dependencies with it. And now actually we can go ahead and install the dependencies by typing npm install. So now it might take some time, so I will be back when it finishes. Alright, now the dependencies has been successfully installed, and you can see the node modules folder here where all of our modules required for this applications are installed. And now what we can do is we can run our application. So if we do ng serve -- or we can do ng s-o. So this will build our project for the first time, and then it will open our project inside our default browser, which is Chrome in my case. So this is the default Angular application that we get with the Angular CLI. Now if you remember, when we created our application with the CLI, we had added two additional parameters. One is for -- routing for the routing, and one is -- style equal to SCSS for changing styles from CSS to SCSS. Now if we go to our source folder, and here you can see that is styles.scss, so that is SCSS instead of CSS. Also wherever we are using CSS inside our application, like here, also if we will be generating components, then it will also be CSS, or actually SCSS. And regarding the routing, here you can see we have that additional routing module. So if we click on it, and I will actually close the terminal here, and you can see we can add our routes here directly. So if we hadn't put dash dash routing, so it won't create or generate that module. So what we have to do is we have to create that manually. And now we can close it, and let's open the terminal again, and we can actually close this command, and let's clear it. Now we will see how we can generate or create a new component. So what we can do is we can type ng generate and then component, and then we have to type the name of the component. So let's say we want to give our component a name test. So if we run it with dry run, so if you remember from the beginning when we generated our project, so with dry run it won't actually create the component on our file system, but it will show what files it will generate. So if we run this, so you can see it will create these 4 files, and then it will update our app module.ts. So if I maybe refresh it, you can see we don't have any component in our project here. So what we can do is, so maybe if I run it without the dry run, and here you can see we have that test component here. So these 4 files are created now, and also it has updated app.module.ts. So if I click here, and maybe let's close the terminal, and what it will do is it will add that import statement for our component, and then it will add it inside our declarations array. So let's close it, and also maybe let's revert that commit, so it will remove these files. So it won't actually maybe remove this folder, we can add that or remove that manually. So let's clear the terminal now. Now what we can do is, so instead of ng generate component, we can also type ng g, short for generate, or we can say c, and that is used for component. And now we can type, let's type test component again. So now we can do, let's put dash dash dry run again, and now we want to use different parameters or maybe the properties that we can use. So we can use dash dash inline template. Alright, so if I run this, and now you can see it will only generate the 3 files, so it won't generate that .html file. And now if I add that dash dash inline style, so now here you can see it will only generate 2 files. We will see it in a second how the structure looks inside of our component file. So we can also use dash dash spec equal to false, and now if I run it, and you can see it will create one file, and then it will update our module file. So now what you can see is if we do this, so this will create a folder called test, and then inside of that we will generate that component. Now what if we want to add test component inside of our root directory? So what we can do is, so here we can add one more parameter called flat. So now if you see, so here it was creating app test, and inside of that folder it is creating that component. And if we use that command, now it will create a test component inside of our app directory directly. So now let's run this command without the dry run. Alright, so here you can see the component. So if I click on it, and now you can see, so here we are getting that template property. So that was actually template URL. If we maybe don't use the inline template, actually let's create one more component to make it clear. So if I do nggc dummy, and now we have that dummy component, and now this, and let's put it side by side. So that should be split left, I think. Okay, so let's close it, and here we can see, and I will remove that part. So here we have that dummy component.html, but in our test component we are using that template tag. Also, if we go to our dummy component.ts, and here we are getting that template URL. So in our test component we are getting just a template, so we have to use these backticks, I think. So we have to use backticks, and then we can add multi-line HTML, and here we are putting template URL, and then we are passing our HTML path. So this is HTML path here, and again for the styles we have to put it inside of this array. And but if we are using our dummy component.html, then we are adding our style URLs, and here we can add the path to our style sheets. So here we are using dummy.component.scss, and additionally we haven't used dash flat for the dummy, so that has created a folder called dummy, and inside of that we are getting these files, and also we are getting that spec file which we are not getting with the test component. And so we have the test component which has template, styles, and everything inside of that one file, and we don't have that test file generated with it. So let's close it for now, and then I will actually revert back, and let's maybe generate a component again, ngGC, and let's give it a name, home, and let's actually remove that. And now maybe let's commit it, add home component. Alright, so now we have that home component, and now let's clear this terminal. Let's actually go to our app routing module, and let's add the route for our home page. So if we click here and maybe add a path, so for our root path we want to use component, and let's add home component here. And if I save it, and let's actually run the application, so I will do ng-serve, and now here in our application in the browser, in the bottom you can see we are getting homeworks, so that is coming from our home component HTML. Now let's remove some code from app component.html, so I can actually maybe remove that part, and let's add a header, ng CLI essentials. And if we go back, and now we can see we are getting ng CLI essentials, and then we are getting our HTML data from home component.html. So here in our home component.html we already have homeworks, and then if we change it, this is template for our home page, and if we save it, and now you can see we are getting this is template from our home page. Additionally, if we want to see all the commands that we can use with ng generate components, so we can do ng-gc, and actually we can put -- help anywhere, and then it will show us what commands we can run with it. So we have many features here, so we can run -- try run, flat, that we have already done, inline style, template, so we can use all these commands here, all the properties here. Alright, so let's clear it for now, and now let's see how we can generate a new module. So we can type ng-g module, or we can use m, and let's give it a name, todos, and let's first run it with dry run to see the output. So we can see we will get these two files, and actually I don't want the spec file or the testing file, so I can do spec equal to false. So it will now create a one module file, so maybe let's run it. And now on the left we can see we have that todos, and then we have that todos module. Alright. Additionally, what we can do is we could have passed dash dash routing with it. So maybe actually let's see. So if I maybe revert that, or maybe I will delete that. So if I run that with dash dash routing, and now you can see we have that two files, todos module and todos routing module. So if I close it, and you can see similar to our app routing module, so we have that todos routing module. So that module or that routing module will be specific to our todos module. So let's see how we can lazily load it. So we can go to our app routing module, and then we can add path, and here we want to go to todos, and now instead of component, what we want is we want to use load children, and here we have to put the path to our todos module class. So we can do dot slash, then we will go to todos, then slash todos dot module dot ts, and then we have to use the hash symbol, and after that we have to use that class name that we have defined for our todos module. So we can paste it here, and now the last step we need to do is we can close this, and then we can go to todos routing module, and here we have to add the path for our component that we want to load. So currently we don't have any component inside of our todos, so let's generate it first. So I will clear the terminal here, and then let's create a component by typing ng g c, and then I will go todos slash then todos. So that will create todos component inside of our todos directory, and then we can add maybe dash dash dry run, and also I want to add inline style, and I don't want a testing file. So now we can run this. So here you can see, so it will create two files, todos component.html and todos component.ts, and then it will update our todos module. Also I want to create it in the root of todos, so what I can do is I can pass dash flat. So if you remember from the previous component we have created, so now we can run this, and you can see it will create a todos component inside of our todos directory. So now let's run it without dry run. Alright, so it has created a todos component and then todos component.html, and now we want to load this todos component.html, and then it will show our todos works. So what we can do is we can add our path here. So now this will act as children, so we can create, actually maybe let's use it here. So I will do path, and let's go to the root path, and then we can add component. So I want to add todos component. So now if you see, we are adding that root path, or we are not adding anything here. This is because we have already added that path in the todos. So if I save it, and if I actually run this command, and let's run ng serve, here we are getting an error, couldn't resolve module todos slash todos module.ts. Alright, now I think I know the error. So what we can do is we can actually remove this, and let's save it. I actually think we have one more error. So if we go to app module.ts, so when we generated our todos component, it has actually added that to declarations array inside of our app modules. We actually don't want that. It should have added to the todos module, so we can now add that manually. Also, if we had passed our todos module name when we were generating the component, so it should have done that. So let's remove it from there, so we don't need it here, and we can go to our todos module, and now we can add our todos component here, and let's save it, And now if we see in the terminal, we don't have any error. And now if we go to our todos route, okay, so we are seeing our todos work. So that is coming from our todos.component.html. So if I close this terminal and I go to todos component.html, alright, so this is coming from here. Now let's see how we can generate a new service. So if we open our terminal and let's create a new terminal here. So we can type nggs, that is for the service, and then we want to generate todos service inside of todos, and let's run it with try run first. Okay, so it will create a todos service. So we don't want to generate spec file, so we can write --spec equal to false. This seems okay, so let's run it without try run. Okay, so we have that todos service, so let's close it, and maybe let's create a get todos method. And what I want to do is I want to return observable of, and maybe let's create an object, and let's set id1 and title maybe 1, and let's copy paste it a couple of times so I can do. Okay, so let's add 2 here and maybe add the third one also. Alright, so now I have saved it, and now to use it inside of our component, actually let's generate a new component first. So I will clear the terminal here and let's create a new component called todos list actually. So I will say nggc todos/todo list, and let's actually run this. So it will create a new component here, and now what we can do is, and let's also add the routing for it now. So we can pass the children array here, and inside of that we can again create path. So let's go to list, and then we want to use the component todo list component, and let's save it. So now if we go to todos/list inside of our browser, and then it should load a to-do list component. Also, if we go to our todos module, here you can see this time it has added to-do list inside of our todos module. Alright, now we can go to our to-do list component.ts file, and then we can inject our todos service. And here what we can do is let's create a property called todos, and then we can do this dot todos equal to this dot todos service dot get todos. Alright, and now we can go to our todos list component.html, and let's create an unordered list. So we can do ng4 and let todo of todos, and we have to use async pipe, and now we can use todo dot, I think I have given the name title, so I can save it now, and now we can run the application again. So if I close, okay, so we are getting an error, property get todos doesn't exist. Okay, so if I close it, so here we can see we have defined that get todos. Okay, actually I think we are missing something. So if we go to our todos component.html, we have to add a router outlet here. So this is our main HTML file, so that we can add, let's say, placeholder here for our routes to show. So now here let's add todos header. So if I save it, alright, so on the todos we are getting the todos header. So if we go to /list, okay, so we should be seeing list, and yes we are. So we are getting these 3 todos items that we have added in our service, so that is working fine. Similarly, instead of async, we could have used, so if you are familiar with that subscribe structure, so we can use todos service dot get todos dot, so that should be subscribe, and then we can add data here, and then this dot todos equal to data. So now we don't need that, and also we can remove async here. Alright, so this works similarly. So I will actually keep async for now, and let's comment this out and maybe uncomment it. Similarly, we have many other commands that we can use with Angular CLI. So if we do ng help, and we can see we have that many commands, add, build, config, so we can use any of these. So I won't get into all of these. So you can take a look at all these commands. One thing I want to mention is, if you are struggling with the Angular CLI commands, we have that Angular CLI graphical interface. If you search for Angular console, and you can go to angularconsole.com, and then you can download it for your specific platform, whether you are on Mac, Windows or Linux. Actually, I can show you how it looks. So this is the interface when you open Angular console for the first time. Now you have a couple of options. So this is a tab where your recent project will show up, and then you can create a workspace, or you can click here, or you can open one. So what I actually want is, I want to open one, so I can click here, open. And now we have to select the folder we want to open. So I will go here, and then maybe currently I think I have created a project in the users. And now here you can see we can open this, and so this is the interface. So we can serve this if you click here. So now it will run ng serve command, and we can test it, we can build it, or we can generate a component. So let's say we want to create a component, so we will click here, so generate component, and then let's give it a name. So let's say some component, maybe. Actually I will say about. So here this has selected the project. Also you can see at the bottom it will show the dry run commands automatically in the real time when you add some parameters here. So we have to select the module. So we want to add about component into our app module, so we will select that. So we have that export command. So this is used when we want to share the component we want to use, so we won't be using that. So we can actually click on that option fields, and now similar to maybe if we click on inline style, so you can see in the bottom we have that inline style. Similarly we can have inline template and all the other commands that we can use. So we can also add maybe styles. So instead of CSS we can click on SCSS. It won't make much sense here because we have already added inline styles. So if we remove that inline style here, so you can see it will create .scss file. So actually I will remove that inline template also here. So you can actually take a look at all these commands. So we have that flat here, so we can use that. So now what we can do is we can click generate. So it will create or generate that component for us. Now inside our VS Code, we will actually close this terminal. So let's close it for now, and let's use that. So if you go to source app, and now we have that about component that we have created with a Angular console. So you can see how easy it is. We don't have to remember all these commands. So if you see in the Angular console, the command we should have return is ng generate, and then this schematic. Actually we can just write component. So this is actually because of Angular console make use of either the Angular schematics or the Laravel schematics. So these are slightly different. So then we are passing that about. So here we have passing that project name. So this is because we can create multiple projects inside of one Angular CLI project. So that is why we have to pass that project parameter here. But in our case we had only one project, so we didn't have to do that. And then we are passing that module. So similarly, that I was asking, maybe I was telling. So you can use the module name where you want to add the declarations for that component, and then for our style sheet we want to use SCSS. And now if we go back here, so this was the first tab. So we are in this, and now we can click on that generate code. So here you can see we have these many options. So we can create service worker, a new application that I was discussing, and we can create a component, directive, so all from that one interface. So let's say if we want to create a service, so let's give it a data service, and now we have to select the project. So we want to select ng CLI here, and so actually it will create a project. So if we go to option fields, so we can remove spec here. So in the bottom you can see it will create only one file. So if we enable it, so it will generate our spec file with it. So let's actually remove it and generate it. So it has actually created it. And now in our VS Code, in the file structure, we can see we have the data service here. So it is actually very easy to use Angular console, but you should know what you are doing. So if you get familiar with the command line first, so it will be very easy to use Angular console.